All right, we are live. I am coming to you from Spokane, Washington for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I am personally going for a I think perfect 4-0 record on the road following the Gaels along, and this time going to be at the Kennel for this one. So it's going to be an exciting night. Obviously, St. Mary's Gonzaga tonight. You do have Santa Clara, Washington State just down the road here at the Palouse as well. So a good number of games on the WCC slate. But we're going to start off with Rocco Miller from the Bracketeer. Start to talk about what we have coming up with what seedings look like and everything else. Rocco, how's it going, and where are you coming from this time?
Great to be on with you again, Zach. Happy WCC Saturday. Of course, I'm excited from afar today. I'm still in the South Florida area. I'm making my way later today to New York. Possibly going to pop into that St. John's UConn game tomorrow. Won't make it in time for the Duke Illinois. I know Madison Square Garden is nationally ground zero for this weekend with those two huge games. But yeah, it's been good. I've got some friends down here. Got to spend a couple of days with, and then same with up there. And then I'll make my way back for midweek action next week. We have a huge week in the WCC next week, so looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that midweek Santa Clara Gonzaga game on Tuesday
Yeah.
coming up is a big one down at the Levy Center, and of course, like that is a Gonzaga's going to look at this as the revenge game, but they've got to be able to take care of business first tonight at the Kennel. So, kind of let's talk about Gonzaga first and kind of where they are, because this is a squad that obviously like has not quite met all the expectations that we many of us are so used to. And I do think maybe like some of the struggles, the 7 losses are maybe a bit overblown when you think about just they haven't really lost any of these games by like a wide margin. These all been like single digit games. They're not getting blown out at all, but they're just not closing them out. When you examine this team, like at this point, I know like most everyone has them between like an 8 or 9. Is that kind of about where you have them as well?
It's exactly where I have them. I have them 32nd overall on the projected seed list, Zach. So that's the final 8 seed and one spot away from the best 9 seed. So couldn't be more 8-9 than that. But I agree. Like the whole body of work is what the committee is going to look at. The nice thing about the WCC, and I think we've talked about this in other years as well, is everything they do in Vegas will matter quite a bit. I think the first time the earliest the committee will meet is on that Tuesday where the WCC championship game is. Of course, most of the voting and all of these, the selection element of it before they go to seeding will occur probably Wednesday and into Thursday. So they'll all have time to digest what Gonzaga does in Vegas, which means Gonzaga has that luxury of turning on the lights here today, playing St. Mary's in a big matchup at home where they'll be favored to win that if they can handle their business. It'll be an all is right in the world feeling for the Gonzaga faithful. Obviously, I think they do have concerns because of what you said, the 0-7 in close games. I mean, that's just crazy. 3 of those were overtime losses. When you look at the West Virginia loss, the Kentucky loss, and the Oregon State loss, but at the end of the day, if they can finish 2-1 in these last 3 or 3-0, I think the committee will feel very secure about selecting Gonzaga. And then from there, it becomes a seeding discussion. And we saw this play out a little bit last year. They don't have the great road win like they got at the end of last year with Kentucky. So I feel like they're a little bit limited when you want to compare it to 2024. But, you get a road win it'll be treated as a road win at San Francisco, a road win at Santa Clara, which would avenge one of your losses if you're Gonzaga. And of course, settling the score with St. Mary's tonight. If they do all 3 of those things, they actually could work their way. I think they would be at least a 6 with the upside of a 5 seed. So, at the end of the day, based on how close they are to the cliff throughout this year, that probably sounds pretty good.
Right. It's yeah, especially considering when you think about all those close losses, the missed opportunities that they have had. But yeah, the 6 seed would be probably a great spot for the Zags at this point if they're able to close out these last 3. Uh, 3 quad 1 games that they have in this last couple weeks of WCC play, which a lot of years they don't get the three
Yeah,
quad one
it,
of
it
the
didn't it didn't exist, quite honestly. So now
exactly.
that's an awesome omen for what this league has become this year. And yeah, and like I said, in Vegas, if they get one of those top 2 spots, they'll have their typical bye till Monday. They only play 2 games. Just winning that semifinal will, of course, punch their ticket. I think the other element, like if you want to look at worst case scenario, is that the bubble is just so low on options right now. Now, again, that could change if we have upsets in like the American Conference Tournament, the Atlantic 10, the ACC, even maybe even the Big East. So there is a potential for 4 to 5 bid steals, which we did see last year. So Gonzaga still has to. They can't. They can't ease through this. These are still very important games.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were discussing just all of the potential like bubble teams or bid stealers or whatever else last night. Even thinking about the potential two.
Yeah,
Is there a potential two bid Big West out there
I
with
think so.
The Irvine San UC San Diego? That UC San Diego team's done some damage um, throughout the course of the year. Well, let's flip
They
it to St.
belong, Zach.
Mary.
They
What's that?
belong. UC San Diego belongs. So I think two Big West is very much in play. But now the Irvine side of it is probably over. It's just a matter of if anybody but San Diego wins the tournament, that's how they get to two.
Yeah, that's kind of like the quick read I had as well. But this, all right. So switching to St. Mary's and where they are, obviously they're in the driver's seat. They really only have to win one of these, probably one of these next three, to be able to clinch the WCC championship. They have the opportunity to do it tonight here in Spokane at Gonzaga on their senior night, which is just kind of like check off all the superlatives of what they can do. Uh, on Saturday, but like thinking about where are they now, because it feels like that they are almost undervalued still because of what they've done to this point. Yes, they don't have the some of the big flashy wins. Nebraska has kind of had its ups and downs, and obviously some recent downs in the last like few days. USC has not been all that great. The Utah State loss is maybe the one that kind of like stings more than anything. But you look at
Right.
this resume where St. Mary's is and the opportunities that are left. What is kind of like maybe their cap of where they are now, where you have them now, and maybe that cap of what they could be?
For sure. So a road win at Gonzaga would be big time because the way the committee sorts results is how you do against the net, not necessarily the board. So right now, Gonzaga's 32 on the board, what I call the board, but it's the seed list as well. A lot of names for that. But when you're looking at results, it's saying that Gonzaga is the 10th best team based on the net. So that's a top 10 road win. That would be an absolute needle mover for the Gaels. The thing the Gaels have going for them as well, like they did last year, is their tremendous work on the road. They have one loss on the road by 1 point, of course, at San Francisco. So they've handled their business they've gone to places like Oregon State where almost everybody else struggled. Gonzaga lost there, Oregon barely won there, the rest of the WCC lost there, I believe. So um, that one stands out. The win at Utah stands out. You just watched Utah handle both Kansas teams, for example. So that's clearly a tough place to win. Santa Clara, they won. That was a game I covered, 30-0 run. So these guys are obviously legit, and they have a very unique ability to extend leads, and that makes a big difference for seeding. As you see today, they're 20th in the net, which suggests as high as a 5 seed like right now. I don't think they have the resume quite yet to back that up, which is why they're falling in the 7 seed area for me. And they've kind of had to work their way up from 9 to 8 to 7. Saw a very similar pattern last year. So I think, with the road win today, kind of completely changes a lot of that because they're being compared to teams like right now. The teams right above them are Clemson, Memphis, Ole Miss, Kansas, and those teams, of course, have besides Memphis, have a bigger mix of results. But with St. Mary's, it's really hard to look at them and say really anything that negative because they've been so consistent on the road. They're playing so well down the stretch that it's pretty safe to let them win a lot of those comps, especially if they can anchor the resume with a win like today. Now, if they don't win this game today, they're still in a strong spot, but that's where you're trying to figure out where the committee feels about them, and they might land where they are right now, which is a 7.
If so, like thinking about that game, like the implications of tonight, like is this the sort of game that could like jump them an entire seed line, or what's kind of like the movement of what this game would be if the St. Mary's were to get the win tonight?
Yeah, I think they would move up to a 6 for sure, at least on my board, because they're 25th right now on the seed list for me. So they're the best of the sevens. UCLA and Illinois both took tough losses this week. So the Gaels, just by hanging around, not doing anything, passed both of those teams. So now they're one away. So from a Clemson, Memphis, Ole Miss, Kansas point of view, if any of those teams fall today, a couple of them like Clemson have big games. Um, St. Mary's can naturally move up, even in a close loss to a 6. But I think with a win, it's just like they can win a lot of those comparisons, regardless of if those teams win, and that's kind of a rare deal because usually in WCC play, you're not playing as good of an opponent as some of these big conference teams. So that's what's at stake in the immediate future. But I think big picture, like you asked about, they get the LMU away game. As long as they handle their business there. Oregon State's leaked a little oil down the stretch. Should be able to handle that home finale. And like we said with Gonzaga, like you have those 2 games in Vegas will count towards everything. Which again, I bring it up like it's breaking news or something, but most of the power conferences, quite frankly, the work is done before those tournaments really play out. So they're a little bit more under the gun to finish their regular season versus what St. Mary's has and the rest of the league.
Yeah, that's like the same seem like they're in position, like, but there's not a whole lot of meat left on the bone. It's kind of like they have to kind of just close out what they can close out and um, almost kind of hope that some of the other power conferences slip a little bit to kind of help their case move up. Now, one of the other teams, obviously USF, is also in an interesting position. Like they're kind of on a lot of brackets. They are starting. They're on the outside of the outside. They're starting to sniff back into this conversation. Obviously, they have 2 more games left, and one of them is against Gonzaga at Chase Center. How much does what is there? How much can USF do to help an at-large case, or really are we still looking at that this is a team that has to win in Vegas to be able to really get in, or like what's maybe the percentage chance of, let's say they beat Gonzaga next Saturday, they get to the title game in Vegas, don't win it, but they get there. Is that enough to get them an at large, or are we going, or is this is a team that's going to just have to run the table?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I think just based on all the variables that they have no control over, whether it's bid steals from other leagues, whether it's other bubble teams finally stepping up and winning some big games themselves. The Dons, I think, winning out is, of course, the best path forward. Their best road win right now is Loyola Marymount. That's barely hanging on as a quad 3. They had a road Pepperdine that fell out of quad 3. It's a quad 4 now. So there's really nothing unless you want to count the Loyola Chicago win in Milwaukee, which also fell to quad 3. There's really nothing away from the Hilltop that really pops. Now at the Hilltop, they got the big win over St. Mary's. They got Boise State, another bubble team early, and that matters a lot. They beat them by 11. So, the committee can really look at that if they want to. The Santa Clara win, they pulled out in overtime at home. You just, history teaches us, Zach, that you have to be able to do stuff away from home to get in. It's the committee chairman, doesn't matter who it is, almost every single year will say, who did you play? Where did you play? How did you do? What they're really saying is, who did you beat away from home? And right now, the Dons are 6-7. So they did pick up some wins. Of course, they handled their bottom of the WCC business, like winning in San Diego and at Pacific and Pepperdine. But they really needed like a top 2 quad road win. So I feel like that Oregon State road win, it's not the holy grail by any means, but it would at least start to tell a little bit better story on the road than what they have right now. So I do feel like just because of their situation specifically, that's a really critical game to go get, no matter what happens with Gonzaga. Now, of course, beating Gonzaga is going to help a lot too. So let's not, let's not sweep that under the rug at all. But I think if they get both of those, it's a big if. They have to play very well to do both. Then I think you could definitely put them in the field. And even then, you're still comparing them to a lot of teams similar. But I think the Dons, right now, the thing you could pick apart is in quads 1 and 2, they're 3-7. It's not the greatest record. It's actually fairly poor, 30% of the time getting a win. But they're perfect everywhere else. They're 18-0 against everywhere else. And so a lot of teams they're compared against, either have a bad loss or more than a bad loss
Mhm.
in those lower areas, or if you can believe it, some of them, like I'm looking at Xavier and Indiana and some of these teams, like they only have one or two wins in some of these categories. So the Dons can actually still win some of those competitions right now when you're looking at all the options. So I think they're still alive for an at large, but I really do feel like it needs to be pretty perfect from here.
Yeah, and that is the team again. You mentioned the road, the struggles on the road, the fact they hadn't gotten a big one, and obviously at Oregon State would be a a huge feather in the cap if they're able to get that one,
Yeah,
because that's a place that no one has really played well in, except for St. Mary's is the one outlier in that entire group. They've defended the home court well. I think it's like 15-2
right.
at Bill Coliseum this year. So the one other, and it might be just the outside shots is the door closed for Santa Clara, and do they have to just run the table?
It probably is because there's, we're the way you got to look at it is there's 12 committee members. So I think Santa Clara has some very interesting elements, and we're dealing with a very uninteresting bubble in most of these options. So one thing I like to say when I'm on the mock committee, that I do each year, and we have all those meetings cranking up in a couple weeks, but is I like to bring up teams that win games in buildings that nobody else did. So as it stands today, Santa Clara is the only team to win in the Kennel. They're the only team to win at McNeese. Those are two tournament teams, and I think that's extremely compelling. They also scheduled the most aggressively anywhere in the West Coast, not just the West Coast Conference. Probably if you factored in the Mountain West, the Big Ten, ACC, whatever conference these teams are all in now, former Pac-12 teams. Like nobody was more aggressive than Santa Clara. The fact that they even have a win at McNeese tells you everything you need to know about how they scheduled. So, like if I was one of the 12 members, I'd fight to the death. And then if they sweep Gonzaga, they get to play them like you said earlier on Tuesday. Obviously, they have another important quad two level road game at Wazoo today. Obviously, we're looking at a scenario where they went out maybe to the championship game of the WCC. Um, I think they would definitely be discussed. I just really, being the guessing committee guy that I am, I still unfortunately would guess that probably more members would vote against them than for them. And that's mainly because if anybody hasn't seen them play, which unfortunately we have to be realistic here, some of these people probably haven't seen them play.
Yeah,
Um, they're and you saw the ball injury, they might count that into consideration now if he's gone for the year. So all that stuff's working against them. The metrics that they look at are the strength of resume and the wins above bubble. And Santa Clara is suffering in both. Like to me, I feel like it's they should be higher in both, but I think it's because they took the Stanford home loss, the North Dakota State home loss, obviously. The Arizona State loss keeps getting worse. Nevada didn't have a good year; they got blown out there. So all these subpar losses have just kind of snowball affected their resume. But there is one, the KPI, which is a little overlooked. I'll be honest on that too. But the KPI loves the Broncos. They've been consistently top 50, top 55. At one point, they were top 40. And I feel like if they win the Gonzaga game again at home this time, and then finish the rest of the season with 2 wins at Washington State and Pacific, if they're top 40 in a metric, that's going to grab everybody's attention in there. So I like that you brought them up because I don't think it's over. I still don't think it's likely, if that makes sense. I would put a
yeah,
less than 20% chance on it, but I think if there's ever a selection Sunday surprise this year, it's going to be this team.
yeah. That's an interesting case again. Like a lot of it does feel like a lot of the case is also involved with both USF and with Santa Clara that their this week's performances against Gonzaga are going to probably be like one of the helpful parts of what they have to do. And it's kind of interesting to think about if like, well, if Gonzaga loses this game, this game, this game, now it's almost on the flip side. What if Santa Clara does take care of business and USF does the same? Is Gonzaga then in trouble if they lose both of those games?
Right. Yeah, I'm curious about that too because Gonzaga, their big issue is basically their win percentage in these columns. But again, like they have wins at San Diego State. I think they're one of the only teams to win there
Mhm.
in Viejas. And then they also have a win over Baylor, who, they're like a 9 seed. They're in their same area right now, the seed list, by 40 or 38. Indiana's sniffing around the bubble. They beat them by 16. And they've beaten San Francisco. They've won at Wazoo. So it's like that's the weird thing about the bubble right now is I'm still having a hard time seeing a scenario where you wouldn't take Gonzaga, like
Mm.
because they're top. The NCAA designed the net tool, and I know New Mexico last year was number 22, and they were going to leave them out if they didn't win the Mountain West tournament. So that's like our most extreme example. But I can't even see Gonzaga slipping to the 20s. They're number 10 right now. So as long as they lose these games close, they're probably going to still be in the top 15, right? Maybe
Mhm.
17, 18 at the worst. So yeah, I think Gonzaga is going to find their way in. It's just it would just be really bizarre just to kind of see that scenario based on you and I have been following this league our whole lives.
Yeah.
So history doesn't. There's really we haven't seen Gonzaga do that before.
Right. And I mean, and I don't expect it to happen, but there is obviously that possibility that this is a scenario. It is a realistic scenario. These Santa Clara USF played well.
Tough
Like
games.
they obviously Santa Clara has beaten Gonzaga already once. Now they get to have them on their home court, and Gonzaga in these close games has not performed well. So there's there could be a perfect storm of a lot of these factors that just play into maybe Gonzaga does lose those couple games, but realistically, I still think the Gonzagas do hold on. Like they'll close it out. They'll take care of their business before we get to Las Vegas in a couple weeks. All right. I'm just trying to look at my notes here. Rocco, I think that's it. Like, what's our winner? When's the next time we're going to be able to see you on a WCC gym?
Well, certainly the semifinals in Vegas, so you can count on that. And I think there's a really high likelihood I'll be at the Chase Center for the big one with San Francisco Gonzaga. So certainly look forward to that. It's kind of like a tune-up for the West Regionals, which will be also in the Chase Center. So might as well get my feet wet. I haven't been there since the 2022 West Regional, which was a phenomenal experience. One of those nights I walked out with Coach K and his wife, like during that was on the broadcast almost every
Mm.
night with that whole story with Duke going to the championship game. But we had Gonzaga there getting upset by Arkansas with Musselman to the Elite Eight, and we had Texas Tech, which was a really, really good team. I have no idea what four teams are going to make it, but just getting back in that building, getting familiar with it again, and getting ready for a great West Regional next month. I think you'll see me there.
Yeah, hopefully we do see at least one WCC team reach that West Regional
That'd
at
be
Chase
amazing.
Center.
That'd be amazing.
Definitely,
Yes.
definite possibility that we could see at
Yeah.
least one of them there. Thanks a lot, Rocco, for hopping on. It's always great to talk the brackets with you and where we are at this stage. Obviously, we'll catch up in Vegas at the very least,
Yes.
and we'll get to everything down the road.
Sounds great, Zach. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rocco.
Cheers.
All right, so looking at this Gonzaga St. Mary's game, this is an opportunity, obviously, for both of these squads to really pad the resume, really do something that they both do need it on the seeding purpose because neither of these teams want to end up stuck on that 8-9 line because that is the absolute worst spot that you could possibly be in. Even obviously because you just don't want to have that one game and then have to play the one seed. And almost like every other St. Mary's Gonzaga matchup, the name of the game here is pace. It is about whoever is going to control how fast or slow this game goes. Gonzaga is going to try to push the pace. St. Mary's is going to try to slow this thing down, and it can be. We can talk about it simplistically in that way, but there's also a couple of guys like I feel just that are going to maybe kind of turn the tide here and thinking about the way St. Mary's won the last time, Mikey Lewis, obviously, he had 16 points in that first matchup. Kind of his coming out, his introduction to this rivalry. And I wouldn't necessarily expect him to be able to kind of replicate that here at the kennel, only because I think Gonzaga's game plan is going to be probably take him away and force someone else to do it. And with that, it is kind of in my head of what we probably might see is that it almost feels like a Jordan Ross sort of game, that this could be the opportunity for him to kind of have that breakout and maybe have a double digit night. I do think that if he is the one who kind of jumps and gives St. Mary's that little push, that would obviously like make this game a lot more favorable for the Gaels. On the Gonzaga side, honestly, like one of the guys who has been playing well of late, and really he's also one of these guys that makes if he goes well, that team just is that much better, and it's Nolan Hickman. I mean, Hickman's had a couple of really good games back to back here. He had 23 points against Washington State. He had 18 and 7 against Pepperdine. So in the last week or so, he's played really well. Getting back into a little bit more of a rhythm. He had been struggling for a couple weeks there. He did shoot 2 for 7 against St. Mary's the first time around, but we're seeing a little bit more of like the good Nolan Hickman over the last week or so. So that's like if there's someone like I'm watching of like because Caleb Ball hasn't really been. He's had his ups and downs, as has Hickman. But Hickman is playing well at the moment, and that's someone like if I'm watching in this game is going to be a kind of a key factor to me. And then also just thinking about the bigs in this matchup. In the first matchup, we saw Mitchell Saxon foul out late in that game, and Harry Wessels did come in to actually play really well down the stretch and close that game out for St. Mary's. Not only did he have the block at the end, he hit the 2 free throws late, so he really was able to play well in those clutch moments. But we've also seen St. Mary play this double big rotation quite a bit over the last couple weeks with both Wessels and Saxon in the game at the same time, and that is a look that Gonzaga didn't get to see all too much in the first matchup. But that if St. Mary's does employ that, I feel like that's like it's almost a secret weapon of sorts that this is a squad like I mean trying to match up now Saxon guarding Ben Gregg or Michael Ajayi is far different than if it's Palis Morauskas trying to guard either one of them. And if you throw those two out there, that obviously changes just the scope of what Graham Eke is going to do, what Ben Gregg is going to do, what Braden Huff is going to do. It just changes like almost how they're going to do it because now size becomes an actual lore. It's another factor to what we're going to see tonight in the kennel. And also, I mean, Harry Wessels has been playing well in that role. It's the more they've played with each other in the lineup at the same time, it seems they're getting more comfortable with this high-low rotation. They're starting to find each other a little bit better on offense. They're finding these empty spots. They're finding these crevices in the defenses that they're playing to be able to get themselves some better looks. They've passed to each other well. It feels like that Saxon has actually played really well at the 4 as well. I was a little concerned about that early on when they started doing this, but he's looked more and more comfortable on that front. But I will say, like when you have those two in there at the same time, though, the offense could end up getting a bit more limited because that is just two guys who are going to kind of crash and condense the offense into the key. And St. Mary's is not the best of 3-point shooting teams anyway, so it could in a way lend itself to actually be detrimental at times if say like a zone gets put on them, which Gonzaga did do in the first matchup and a lot of teams have done since, to try to mess with St. Mary's and make them do something different that maybe they're not as comfortable doing. Even thinking about the bad 3-point shooting nights that St. Mary's has had over the last few weeks, that 3 for 23 against USF still like sticks in my head about just what the bad of this looks like. Even though yes, they only lost that game by 1, but 3 for 23 is obviously a bad night. And it is a night that this team is clearly capable of having in a bad way. And even looking at the 4-point win that the St. Mary's did get over Gonzaga that first time around, I mean, we could look at the free throws. I mean, St. Mary's shot so poorly from the free throw line in that game, 11 for 22. So there is some room for improvement in a lot of areas for what they did in that first matchup. But even for Gonzaga, I mean, Gonzaga did not shoot from 3 well. Like they were 3 for 17 from the perimeter, which is wildly unusual for that team. So, I mean, we can go through all the numbers and everything else. And just, this is one of those games. The rivalry game that we're going to probably see someone that is unexpected step up and really give this one of these teams a boost. It could be a Nolan Hickman. It could be a Jordan Ross. Honestly, like considering how well he's been playing recently, it could be a Michael Ajayi who has the big night for Gonzaga. There's a lot of options because Ben Grigg's going to get his. Augustus Marciulionis is going to get his points. Like Mitchell Saxon's going to get what he normally does. It's going to be one of the role players that has to step up in this sort of game, and that would be the real tipping point in this matchup between these two. All right, and this isn't obviously the only game that's happening in the WCC this week. Just down the road at Washington State, Santa Clara will be taking on the Cougs at the Palouse and at 3 o'clock. And this game is a big one for both of these teams. More so for Santa Clara because this is a squad that's still trying to do something in WCC play. They're still trying to build that resume, as we talked about with Rocco. And they're facing a team that has lost 7 of its last 8. They have played a little bit better at home, but it's still like this is a Washington team that has been sliding a bit. Santa Clara will likely be without Adama Ball for a while. He did get hurt in the game against LMU the other night, and it did not look good. So like there's no updates. There's no update as of right now of what the status for Adama Ball is, but grabbing the calf, he was on crutches by the end of the game, sitting on the bench. It did not look good for the status of Adama Ball in this one. But honestly, like what we got to see in that game the other night against LMU was Elijah Mahi really played well in that one, and he is almost kind of like the distributor, the orchestrator of the offense that team has been missing in a lot of ways. Like Carlos Stewart is a score first point guard. He's not really the ball distributor that a lot of teams would like to have as their point guard, but Mahi is that guy, and with ball likely being unavailable, he's stepping into that role. I think is a big lift for Santa Clara to be reinserted back into the starting lineup and going through that. Tilly being back for this matchup is also a big boost for them. Johnny O'Neill has played incredibly well over the last month or so. That's someone again. Kind of when we talk about Santa Clara, like Johnny O'Neill is like the X factor, the X factor, the X factor. He plays well, and this team really does go. Santa Clara won the first matchup between these two, and it was not close. Like this game was 93-65 down at Levy Center. And this was a game where Santa Clara just like ran away with it. They were 13 for 32 from three. They had 5 guys in double figure scoring. All like it was Ball with 16, Stewart with 14, Tilly 13, Jake Ensminger with 10. Ensminger has also been playing really well of late, and that's someone that we're going to have to keep an eye on in this matchup as well. Looking at this because Washington State it feels like they're just sliding and sliding and sliding. Again, 7 of the last 8 they've lost. The one game they won is a 1-point win against Pepperdine at Washington State. It's not like even the one was like, oh, like this was a great win. It was almost like dear God, at least we finally won one of these games. Luan Watts did have a triple double the last time these two played, but they need others to step up. Tomas Thrasterson has played a lot better as of late. They're going to need him to continue to do that. Nate Calmey's really struggled against Gonzaga the other night, and that is a guy that they're going to need to play well against Santa Clara if they're going to have a shot. He only had 3 points in the first matchup. He was 1 for 7 from the field. Dane Erikstrup, they're going to need him to also play really well. This is just not a deep Washington State team, and they really do need every last one of their rotation guys, the 6-7 that they have, to play well to be able to pull off this win. To me, like I'm looking at this, I'm leaning Santa Clara in this matchup. They just have done it. Uh, they've played well as of late. They know how to do it against this Washington State team. Yes, going on the road is always a challenge, but Santa Clara has been able to win in some of the tougher environments. They again talked about it earlier. They do have a win in Eastern Washington already against Gonzaga. So this is a squad that is looking to at least pick up that one because they have a short turnaround because they will have Gonzaga on Tuesday night and down at the Levy Center, and that's a huge one for both of those teams. I mean, if Santa Clara can pull that one off and get the sweep against Gonzaga, we could be looking at seed lines and for the WCC tournament, looking maybe a little differently than we're used to seeing going into Las Vegas. And the rest of the slate, you do have Oregon State at San Diego, Portland at Pacific, Pepperdine at LMU finishes out the rest of what we're going to see for WCC play today. I'm taking a look at that Portland Pacific game because that Portland team has been playing well as of late. They won 3 of the last 5 games. They did. I thought they played actually pretty well against St. Mary's the other night, even though that was still a 14-point loss. That is still that's a Portland squad that is offensively starting to do a lot of things well. They're getting a little bit healthier. Masic has played really well. Austin Rapp has been good all season long. They have a lot of guys who are starting to play well at the right time. So this is a squad that is going to have an opportunity to maybe sneak up into that 6 or 7 seed line as if Washington State continues to struggle, if LMU continues to struggle. There is a window for Portland to move back up the standings if they can take care of their business down the stretch against some of the other teams that are down toward the bottom of the WCC, and that does start with Pacific on later on today at 4 o'clock. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I want to thank Rocco Miller one more time for hopping on. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along on social media at Post by Zach and at Unofficial WCC Pod. I will have the report later on in the week about what we saw from Gonzaga St. Mary's over the weekend, what the implications of the final week of WCC play is and are. Only 2 weeks away from Las Vegas and the WCC tournament. March is just around the corner. It's going to get really exciting really quickly here. So thanks all for watching. Thanks all for hopping on, and I will catch you all later.